Parliament's inquiry on state capture in relation to Eskom has been in full swing, and a lot has come from witnesses that have come to testify. Different testimonies have been heard, including those of Eskom's reputational manager and spokesperson, Khulani Qoma, the suspended head of legal, Susan Daniels, former CEO Brian Molefe, former Board Chair Zola Tsotsi, and Public Enterprise Minister Lynne, among others, of course. Well, joining us now for an update is Mondli Gungubele, who is a member of the Public Enterprise Committee in Parliament. Mondli, it's so good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Good morning, Lynne. Good morning to your viewers.
Yeah. What have been your main points of reckoning in this process?
Actually, let me start by saying it's critical to remember that in question here is the sovereignty of the country and the significance of Eskom, and in a broader sense, the state-owned enterprises. That if there were to be uncertainty about the state of those institutions, the sovereignty of the country is under question, and immediately the whole world begins to ask, can we do business with South Africa? And the consequences are dire to think about. But however, let me say, a number of things that have come across, which are we're still interrogating. Yeah. Immediately is the outflow of money from Eskom, in rather apparently in an illegal way, based on no contracts. Those are the things that are coming out, which we are testing, and we are going to reach conclusions with regard to those. And we are saying, if those things are true, something drastic needs to be done.
Indeed.
But we are working on those. So you've listened to Zola Tsotsi, you've listened to Susan Daniel yourself, you've listened to Khulani, the reputational manager, the issues that he shared with the committees. Those issues are not good news in as far as the sovereignty of our country is concerned.
Yeah. It certainly isn't. And I mean, I think a lot of South Africans watching in last week, listening to some of this testimony, as well as, and I imagine you feel the same way, of all these accusations at the moment of receiving bribery and payments on the sidelines. I mean, that must shock you as well. I mean, when we're hearing reports that Minister Bongani Bongo tried to bribe the evidence leader, Ntutuzelo Vanara. I mean, how did you take to that news?
We want to pray, Lynne, that should be false. My prayer is, and all of us as a collective, is that we wish that statement is false. But we are going to watch closely the investigation, because the Parliament has started a process, and we must have heard the committee in unison saying the sooner an inquiry is done on that, the better. Because remember, you're speaking about a very critical person here, the minister, and you're talking about a very critical person, Mr. Vanara, the evidence leader at the technical center of the entire process. You wouldn't want such confusion in that space, in as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. What, I suppose many people are asking this question as well, what prompted Parliament to undertake this inquiry where government actually hasn't even started its own investigation?
Listen. If you know that 90% of electricity in South Africa comes from Eskom, and you know that if Eskom were to stop functioning, the entire business stops functioning, and all the other the implicit consequences would come. Now you know that Eskom being under threat, I want to repeat this, the sovereignty of the country is under threat. So as Parliament, we took a view that we cannot prolong the uncertainty about the state of Eskom. And fortunately, Parliament is not a substructure of the executive, of the cabinet, so to say. Parliament has got its independent responsibility to perform its duties with regard to the sovereignty of South Africa. So it is not up to what the executive does, whether the Parliament does its work or not. And Parliament cannot say in future, we didn't do anything about the uncertainty of the state-owned enterprises because we're waiting for the executive to do something. Because legally there is no basis for us to make that justification.
Let's sort of look more to the future now in terms of the committee. We're expecting, or there is thoughts that the Guptas are going to be subpoenaed, that Duduzane Zuma is going to be also subpoenaed, and possibly our president, Jacob Zuma. Any news on this?
Let me put it this way. Our approach has been in our terms of reference. That's why we got so disappointed when some of government people started attacking the inquiry that it is not objective.
Yeah.
Some of them pretended as if they never read the terms of reference. Terms of reference, we always said, will actually be adjusted depending on the information at our disposal. So there are people who are not in the list of witnesses who will become witnesses depending on the information at our disposal. Duduzane, Gupta, and anybody else, those names have been raised, and even the name of the president has been raised, but we're discussing those. The committee will reach a particular stage depending on the information at our disposal, who finally will have to appear.
Yeah. I want to talk about some of the reports also that came out over the weekend in terms of these threats that are now being levelled against some of the committee members. A few coming out. I mean, we heard Zukiswa Rante's son being threatened, saying your mother is making our lives difficult. I think it's her 17-year-old son. Then we also had Natasha Mazzoni, the DA's representative, being followed, her car being, I think, vandalized, if I'm not mistaken. We heard Zukiswa Rante's husband also in June, July, had an incident where he was being followed. It's just that they seem to be coming in fast and furiously. There's been a call from the DA to offer some protection to those on the committee. What do you think of this? Do you think that that's the right way to go?
You see, that is a very critical area, Leah. Let me tell you this. It's so important that those who want to defend this country must never feel threatened from doing so.
Yeah.
Including our chair of the inquiry, Comrade Zukiswa Rante. You must have heard during the hearing, we were asking Brian Molefe, why do you guys, when you are dealing with these injustices in Eskom, why do you prefer to leave instead of staying on until the injustice is dealt with? She said, we don't know who to rely on. The point I'm making is that we must do everything so that South Africans who love this country should not feel threatened by anything from defending their country. Yeah. So the issue of Zukiswa and a number of other people who are similarly affected being protected, to me, is not a negotiable issue. Because if we want those who still are worried about the future of this country to come out, we must actually come clear with regard to that protection.
Yeah. Finally, just as we wrap up this interview, how much longer do we think that this is going to go on for? And added to that, how binding are the findings going to be? I mean, we did see with the SABC inquiry that those findings were rather binding, and we did see almost immediate changes taking place. Will this be the same, and how much longer?
You know, let me start by saying, we are going to deny. We're going to transnet. Eskom is the first phase. How binding? The strength of the evidence at our disposal and the conclusion the committee will determine the cogence of that evidence in terms of what the government do. I don't want to preempt it now, but we have to reach a point where the conclusiveness of the truth at our disposal, no self-respecting government must be able to ignore it.
We'll leave it on that note. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Always lovely to see you, Mondli Gungubele, who is a member of the Public Enterprise Committee in Parliament. Thank you
very much. Thanks.
All right, let's take a break here on the programme.